Right, hello everyone. Welcome to another episode of Motivating Monday. And today, the passage that I will be going through is 2 Samuel 19. And in this passage, King David has just won a war, so he's victorious. But instead of celebrating, he is actually grieving. He's grieving for the loss of his opponent, because and the opposing leader died, and he is grieving because the opposing leader is Absalom, which is his son, who tried to start a rebellion against him. And so he's very sad, and when the people of Israel see this, they also grieve together with King David. And David, he can't get over the death of his son, and so his commander Joab scolds David, saying that it looks like he loves his enemies and hates his friends. Joab claims that it would have pleased David if Absalom had won and if he had lost his army and his commanders, and that he's okay with the many horrible things that Absalom did, and that he's also dishonoring the soldiers that fought for him. So Joab is concerned for King David, and he's trying to think of David's best interests, and these are very valid points that Joab brings up. You know, if David keeps being like this, if he can't get over the death of his son, it might look like he is okay with all of these things, and that will not be good for Israel. And so David listens, and although I imagine he must still be in a lot of emotional pain, he goes out and he sits at the gate, and Israel comes to him. And then he gives a speech that sways the hearts of the people. So in the end, despite struggling with all his emotions, the death of his son, he still manages to do his duties as a good king, and he regains the hearts of the people of Israel. And he fulfills the responsibility that God gave him to lead God's people. So that's about it for this passage. And I feel like there are a lot of things that we can learn from this. Just the end of this story, because it's quite a long story with Absalom. And I'm very thankful to God for giving us the Old Testament. I feel like it is really very, very good for us to learn from. And even though society today might be very different from what it was like back then, I feel like this sometimes can be a good thing, because we are forced to break down these situations to fundamentals, and when we do that, it helps us to understand what God wants even more, and it's easier for us to apply it to our lives. And so I'll go through a couple of learning points. So we see that David was a very good king, and his mood dictates the mood of his whole country. Like, I imagine if he celebrated the victory, Israel probably would have found no fault in it and would have rejoiced with him. After all, victory in war is a very huge thing. War was very common back then. It was something that was not just common, it was something to be expected. And victory is often celebrated in many other cases, especially with Israel, and the glory is given to God. But because he grieves the death of his son, Israel is also grieving with him, and they are not celebrating the victory. And so actually, the first lesson that I want to draw from this is that we should not envy those with more power than us. And why do I say that about this situation? It's because if you look at the influence that David has, the burden of leadership is extremely heavy on him, and the whole country is watching his every move and his every emotion. And in life, you know, it feels like, and it is true that people will be better than us, and also there will be people that are worse than us in every field. Every field, anywhere that you go, anything that you try to do, there'll be people better and people worse, and that is completely okay. But you often hear that people will complain, maybe your friends or family, or they will wish or be envious of people that are better than them, and that's not an attitude that we should have. Because there are challenges, like if you think about it as a ladder, there are challenges and every place on the ladder, and so we should not envy things that we don't understand. They have their own challenges. We also see through David's reaction that it's very important to balance emotions with your responsibilities. And of course, being a king of Israel, the leader of God's people, he had many responsibilities, and God expected a lot from him. And so that's the second lesson I want to point out. It is that we have to balance emotions with our responsibilities. We're not machines, right? And that's a good thing. It's a beautiful thing. God blessed us with emotions, and it makes existence a lot more meaningful than just calculations or just information. But as a king, despite having such strong emotions, it was also his duty to lead the people, and he had to act in the people's best interests. And so eventually he has to move on from grieving. And the people, it's not just him that suffered, the people also suffered immensely during the Civil War, and he had to acknowledge this as well. So many times, even for us, balancing emotion with work can be very, very difficult. And especially, like, the more power you have, it becomes even more challenging, because there are many more factors and much more at stake for those that you are leading and for yourself as well. It's often a concept that holds true, that the more power you have, the more your mistakes hurt others more than yourself, which is often a very big emotional burden. And so sometimes in life, you just have to, even if you're weak, we can pray to God, and He will give us the strength to make it through. And even if we are weak and have to be strong, our reward in heaven will be well worth it. And it's just for a little while anyways, here on earth. Another lesson that we can draw is we see how important it is to have good friends that aren't afraid to scold you or give harsh advice. So it must be very, very difficult for Joab, if you imagine. I mean, he's the king. He could execute Joab if he wanted to. And he... but instead of being scared and letting David keep grieving and never get over his son, Joab instead gave good advice and told David to go out to the people and speak to them. And he explained to David the rationale behind his words. And he was not afraid to correct David and to tell him, even in David's lowest point in his time of grieving. And so we need friends like this, who aren't afraid to hurt our feelings in the short term, because they know that something else matters more to us. So it's like your friends have to understand your objectives, what you want, and they must be trying to help you to get what you want. And Joab knows that David is loyal to God. He knows that David wants to serve God and he wants to be a good king. But in the short term, David was too consumed by his emotions, and Joab was there to remind him of his duty and his responsibilities. And so being a real friend means wanting what is best for your friend. And that in a secular world, it depends on what your friend wants, but from a Christian perspective, every Christian's ultimate goal is to get to heaven. And so if you see your friend doing something that is hindering them from being closer to God, we should not be afraid to remind them or to give advice that might seem a bit harsh. And we should also learn to appreciate such friends and also to have these qualities in ourselves. This is very difficult for me, and I'm sure for many people as well. It's difficult to practice, because the easy way out is just always say good things, right? You get good feedback and people say you're very nice. But it's very difficult to give harsh advice. We have to help our friends move forward, even through tough times. And that's how we can grow closer as brethren as well. We have to, and as individuals, we also have to keep trying to improve. At least try. You have to at least try. It's difficult, it takes time, and God understands. But He can see our hearts, and if we at least try, we will move forward. It may not be a very obvious change in the short term, but it adds up, and you'll be surprised at how much you change if you put your mind to it, if you're conscious and you just keep trying to learn. Another lesson is that we see that leadership involves not just personal communication, but also public speaking, and working. So working with people is in two ways, right? It's person to person, and also if you're a leader, to your whole group. And David is very good at both, which is something that I also need to practice, and I'm sure it's a very useful skill to have. In fact, I would argue it's necessary if you want to serve God well. And working with people is difficult for some people, and it's very difficult for me. And growing up, I often try to take the easy way out, and it's like you either pay people, like in a work context, so that they are motivated by money, or you do things. I do things myself, which is not good, especially in a church context. It's a nice temporary solution, but it is very, very bad in the long term. And you want your teammates and your friends to have goals that align with you. And it will cost you dearly if you just keep trying to take the easy way out. And don't make the mistake, because I'm trying very hard to unlearn the habit now. And it's really not worth, like, let's say you want to plan an event or something like that, and to reach this short-term objective, you sacrifice a lot in the long term, and in your personality as well. It's not worth it. And it is way more efficient and much greater things can be done if you are a very good leader and you can lead in a way that makes people want to help to reach your common objective. And David was such a leader. He was able to align the objectives of Israel into all wanting to serve God. And you can see throughout David's story, actually, the people were serving God under him. And it takes time. It takes time to build such skills, and but we shouldn't give up. It is, if you are conscious of it and you just keep moving forward, eventually you'll become very, very good, and you'll surprise yourself. I hope that happens for me as well. If you could relate to this passage in any way, it's fine. And if you can't become your ideal self in one day, no one can, right? I'm sure you have an ideal self, something to work towards, and even if it takes a very long time, you just have to move forward. And I encourage you to just be conscious of how you can improve. As long as you're thinking about it, I feel like you will improve, and you can improve in being a leader, a friend, and a follower. And if you just stop to evaluate yourself, I believe that you will achieve great things, and that God will be very, very proud of you. Yep, that's all I have to share for today. Thank you. Holy